All right, class, welcome. Today we're looking at a massive, massive contradiction.
We really are.
It's a piece of engineering that was arguably the absolute peak of an empire's technology, but it arrived at the exact moment the world that built it was just falling apart.
It is such a fascinating case study in timing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, usually when we look at military history, we kind of assume the winning side had all the superior machines.
Right.
But today's subject really challenges that idea. We're going to be analyzing the Nakajima Ki-84 Hayate.
Hayate. Now that translates to gale, correct? Like a strong wind.
Exactly, a Gale. Although, if you were an Allied pilot in the Pacific in, say, 1944 or 45, you wouldn't have called it a Hayate. You'd know it by its Allied reporting name.
Frank.
Frank.
Which you have to admit sounds a little underwhelming. Frank doesn't exactly scream high-performance interceptor.
No, it doesn't. It was actually named after a Colonel Frank McCoy from the Allied Technical Air Intelligence Unit. But you're right, despite the unassuming game, this aircraft was considered by many analysts on both sides to be the single best Japanese fighter to see large-scale operations.
And that's the real hook here, isn't it? Because on paper, this plane was an absolute monster.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We're talking about a machine that could outclimb and, outturn the legendary P-51 Mustang and even the P-47 Thunderbolt. It finally had armor, it had speed, it had heavy firepower.
But it entered service when Japan's entire logistical chain was collapsing.
So the tragedy wasn't in the design itself.
No, not at all. The flaws weren't on the blueprint. The flaws were in the crumbling industrial world it was born into. It's this incredible story of engineering brilliance just trying to outrun logistical defeat.
To really get why this plane was such a paradox, we have to look at the philosophy that created it. This wasn't just an upgrade, it was a total shift in mindset.
Right, you have to look at the lineage. Before the Ki-84, the Japanese Army Air Force relied on two very different kinds of planes. On one hand, you had the Ki-43 Hayabusa. The Allies called it Oscar.
The dancer.
Exactly, the Dancer. It was extremely lightweight, incredibly maneuverable. You could turn inside almost anything in the sky.
But it was practically made of paper.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
It lacked firepower, usually just a couple of machine guns, and crucially, it lacked armor. No self-sealing fuel tanks.
Yeah.
If you got hit, you're burned.
And then on the other end of that spectrum, they had the Ki-44 Shoki.
Tojo to the Allies.
Right, Tojo.
And the Tojo was the interceptor. It was fast, it climbed like a rocket, had heavy cannons, but it was a brick.
The handful to fly.
Oh, a total brick. High wing loading, which just means it was notoriously difficult to fly and absolutely terrifying to land. Pilots who were used to the gentle Oscar really hated it.
So in 1942, the Imperial Japanese Army Air Service comes along and basically asks for the impossible.
They wanted the best of both. The requirements were just staggering. They wanted the maneuverability of that lightweight Ki-43, but the speed and climb of the heavy Ki-44.
And a top speed over 400 miles per hour.
Over 400. And this is the key shift. They demanded pilot protection, armor plating, self-sealing fuel tanks.
Which was a massive doctrinal shift. I mean, the Zero, the Oscar, they were famous for stripping away weight to gain performance. The pilot was almost an afterthought.
By 1942, the reality of attrition had set in. They were losing experienced pilots at just an alarming rate. They finally realized they couldn't afford to lose a veteran every time a plane took a few bullets.
So the lead designer, Yasushi Koyama, he has to figure out how to add all this heavy armor and fuel protection without making the plane fly like a truck. How did he solve that physics problem?
Koyama was brilliant. He designed a very clean, all-metal airframe, flush riveting to cut down on drag. But the secret weapon, the thing that kept it agile, was in the wings. He used something called butterfly flaps.
I've read about these. They aren't your standard landing flaps, are they?
No, not at all. Technically, they're Fowler-type combat flaps. A normal flap just hinges downward, right? It creates a ton of lift, but also a kind of drag.
Like putting your hand out a car window.
Exactly. The butterfly flaps on the Ki-84 were different. When the pilot deployed them, they actually extended backward and out from the wing.
So they're literally increasing the surface area of the wing in the middle of a fight.
Precisely. They increased the wing area and the lift, but with a much smaller drag penalty than a standard flap. This meant a pilot could use them during high-speed combat.
So this heavy, armored fighter could suddenly tighten its turn and hang with the lighter planes.
It gave them that Oscar-like agility in a plane that was built like a tank. You combine that with a bubble canopy that gave the pilot amazing all-around visibility. And, theoretically, you had the perfect fighter. If you are enjoying this video, please watch it until the end. This greatly helps the channel and encourages us to continue our work.
Okay, so the airframe is a masterpiece, but a plane is just a glider without an engine. And this seems to be where the story shifts from, engineering triumph to operational nightmare.
This is the heart of the beast. The Nakajima Ha-45 Homare engine. The name means praise or honor. And on paper, it was an absolute marvel of compact power.
An 18-cylinder radial engine, right?
Yep, 18-cylinder, air-cooled radial. But the real selling point was the packaging. They managed to squeeze about 2,000 horsepower into an engine that was barely larger in diameter than the one in the Zero.
And the Zero's engine was only putting out, what, about 1,000 horsepower?
Around that, yeah. So they effectively doubled the power without making the front of the plane bigger.
How did they even do that?
It was a miracle of miniaturization. They used every trick in the book. Direct fuel injection on later models, and crucially, water methanol injection.
Okay, I want to dig into that because water injection just sounds wrong. You don't want water in your engine. What is it doing there?
It's all about temperature control. When you're running an engine at super high pressure, high boost, to get that 2,000 horsepower, the inside of the cylinders gets critically hot.
So hot, the fuel can explode before the spark plug even fires.
That's it. It's called detonation or knocking, and it will destroy an engine in seconds, literally melt pistons. So they injected a mix of water and methanol into the intake. The water absorbs the heat as it vaporizes, cooling everything down.
It's a chemical intercooler.
That's a great way to put it. It let them run much higher boost for emergency combat power without blowing up the engine. But here's the problem. An engine that complex requires incredible manufacturing precision.
Tiny tolerances.
And perfect maintenance. And, most importantly, high-quality fuel.
And by 1944, high quality and Japan were two things that did not go together anymore.
That was the Achilles heel. The Homare was a nightmare in the field. It was too complex to maintain. Mechanics faced constant oil leaks, vibrations, sudden drops in fuel pressure.
Yeah.
But the fuel, that was the killer.
I've seen reports that by late in the war, Japanese aviation fuel had dropped to around 87 octane. I mean, the gas in your car right now is higher than that.
Exactly. This engine was designed for 100 octane or better. And high octane isn't about power, not directly. It's about stability. It resists knocking. When you put 87 octane fuel into a high compression monster like the Homare, it just starts to eat itself.
So the pilots couldn't even use the full throttle?
Almost never. If they pushed the throttle to the combat setting, the engine would start to detonate. They had to baby it. So they were flying a Ferrari, but they had to drive it like a Corolla because they were running it on lawnmower gas.
And that leads us right into the broader production nightmare. It wasn't just the gas, was it?
No, it was a total systemic failure. Yeah. By 44, 45, American B-29s were pounding Japan's industrial centers. The supply of raw materials, things like molybdenum for hardening steel, was cut off by U.S. submarines.
Which brings us to the famous buckling legs problem.
The landing gear. The struts required high-strength steel that was properly heat-treated. But with the shortages and rush schedules, the heat treatment was often just skipped or done poorly.
So you have a pilot coming back from a mission, maybe he's wounded, plane is damaged, he touches down.
And the strut just snaps. The gear collapses, the plane skids on its belly, the propeller shatters. You lose a brand new fighter before it can even fight again. It happened constantly.
And on top of that, the workforce itself had changed.
The skilled machinists, the guys who knew how to hand-fit these complex parts, they'd all been drafted and sent to the front. The Ki-84s were being built by conscripted high school students.
There's such a heartbreaking irony there. Kids building the planes that were failing because the experts were dying in trenches.
They got so desperate they even tried building variants out of wood.
The Ki-106?
Yeah, Ki-84 made of plywood. They even tried a steel version, the Ki-113, because they had no aluminum left. Just desperate measures.
And yet, despite all of this bad fuel, snapping legs, student labor, when a Frank actually got into the air and everything worked, it was terrifying.
It made its combat debut with the 22nd Sentai in China, August 1944. And initially, it was a huge shock to the Allies.
The American pilots there were used to fighting the fragile Oscars.
Exactly. And suddenly they're up against a Japanese fighter that could dive with them, could take a hit, and could shoot back with two 20mm cannons. For a brief window, the Ki-84 gave them air superiority in China.
But the war moved on. Soon they were defending the Philippines, Okinawa, and the mission changed. They were trying to stop the B-29s.
Which is the hardest mission a fighter pilot can fly. The B-29 cruised at over 30,000 feet, Most Japanese fighters couldn't even get that high.
But the Ki-84 was different.
It had a service ceiling over 34,000 feet. It was one of the few planes that could climb up to the B-29s and still have enough performance to actually make an attack. And with those cannons, it had the punch to bring a bomber down.
They developed those head-on pass tactics, right?
They had to. They'd climb above the bombers and dive head-on, aiming for the cockpit. The closing speed was over 600 miles per hour. You had a fraction of a second to shoot and break away.
Nerves of steel. But even with the Ki-84, it was just a numbers game.
A game they couldn't win. And again, reliability. A group of 20 Ki-84s might take off, but 5 would turn back with engine trouble before they even saw the enemy.
The real aha moment about the plane's true potential didn't come until after the war, when the Americans captured one and tested it properly.
This is the amazing part. The ATAIU took a captured Frank to Pennsylvania. They rebuilt the engine with expert mechanics, put in fresh spark plugs, and crucially, filled it with high-quality 140-octane U.S. aviation fuel.
140 octane versus the 87 octane sludge they were using. It must have been like waking up a sleeping giant.
It was. When they pushed the throttle, the engine didn't knock. It roared. The aircraft hit 427 miles per hour.
427. Let's put that in perspective. That is faster than the P-51D Mustang at that altitude.
It was faster than the Mustang and the P-47. It could outclimb them both. And with those butterfly flaps, it could outturn them.
So the test pilots realized that the only thing that had saved them was Japan's collapsing industry.
The conclusion was sobering. The report basically said the Ki-84 was a world-beating design. If Japan had had the fuel and the quality control to run these planes at their potential, the air war would have been a lot more costly for the Allies.
That is the tragedy of the Ki-84. It was a masterpiece that was never allowed to be a masterpiece. I want to transition now to the story of one specific airplane, because there is only one left in the entire world.
This is the survival story of serial number 1446. Built in Oda in 1944, assigned to the 11th Sentai, known as White 46.
And the Americans found it abandoned in the Philippines.
At Clarkfield, yes. Captured intact. They shipped it to the U.S. and the carrier USS Long Island for those tests we just talked about.
So it does its duty, proves how fast it is, and then by 1952, it's sitting in a surplus lot about to be scrapped.
Right. But then Ed Maloney, the founder of the Planes of Fame Museum, enters the picture. He had a tiny budget. He found 2 Japanese planes in that lot, the Frank and a twin-engine Nick.
And he could only afford one.
He had to choose. He chose the Frank. He recognized its historical significance, and that one decision saved it.
It's incredible. And then in the 60s, they decide to make it fly again.
A huge undertaking. They even brought in Colonel Bud Mahiran, a famous American ace, to help restore the very type of plane he used to fight against.
I've seen footage of it flying over California, just surreal.
It flew at air shows for years. But the emotional peak of this whole story comes in 1973. The plane was bought by a Japanese owner and brought home.
The homecoming.
They held a flight demonstration at Aruma Air Base. A huge crowd gathered, many of them former pilots and mechanics who hadn't seen a Hayate since 1945.
I can't even imagine what that must have felt like.
The plane took off, flown by an American and a Japanese veteran. It's the first time a Japanese fighter had flown in Japanese skies since the surrender. For the people watching, it wasn't just a machine. It was a ghost.
And where is White 46 today?
After a period of neglect, it was rescued again. Today, it's preserved indoors at the Chair and Peace Museum for kamikaze pilots.
We should be clear, the Ki-84 wasn't a dedicated kamikaze plane.
No, it was too valuable an interceptor. But it did escort kamikaze missions. Its presence there is fitting. It's a memorial to the engineering and the tragedy of that generation, the only one left.
So as we wrap up, what's the big takeaway? How should we remember the Ki-84?
I think the Hayate is a lesson in the hierarchy of warfare. It proves you can have the brilliant designer, the revolutionary engine, the aerodynamic perfection. But if your supply chain is broken, if your fuel is bad, if your skilled labor is gone, the blueprint doesn't matter.
A machine is only as good as the infrastructure behind it.
Exactly. The Hayate was a Ferrari in a world that had run out of gas. It proves that engineering brilliance just cannot overcome logistical defeat.
A sobering but fascinating look at the last scale. If viewers enjoyed the video, they can subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell to be notified about new videos, click the like button, and share the video with their colleagues, as this helps us maintain the channel. Thank you.